everyone. How was lunch? I thought so too, yeah. What was the best thing? Fantastic. I'm so glad to hear, and I'm so glad that you're so fueled, because we're about to have a contest. SOS, I may need help. So today I want to go over a few different topics. I'd like to go into some myths and misconceptions about strength training, talk about what muscles are and how they build strength, and go over how you might start structuring your session if you're thinking about trying some strength training or resistance training. I'd like to go into some examples of different ideas for your session and end with some future directions in research, as well as some questions. First and foremost, some myths and misconceptions. So we are going to play a game, everyone. Anyone ever play Jeopardy? Yeah. Okay, so we are dividing into 2 teams. We're going to divide based on a very, very serious question. Which ice cream is better? Rocky Road or chocolate chip cookie dough? Okay, my chocolate chip people, raise your hands. And put them down. My Rocky Road people, raise your hands. Ooh, you guys, you know each other. You sat kind of in a group. Okay, so you know your teammates now. There are prizes on the line if you win and get questions right. You ready? Can I have a volunteer for the first question? If you haven't ever done Jeopardy before, how you do it is you choose your category and you choose the amount. In the very back. Oh. Okay, sign of hands, adults versus kids? Okay, challenge accepted, let's go. I believe kids have the first question. Which category and which number do you want? Ooh, okay, let's do it. True or false? When you find the perfect type of exercise, you should just stick with it. It is in fact false. Becoming too specialized can actually put you at an increased risk of injury. We see this a lot in youth athletes who specialize too early in things like baseball and then end up with chronic ligamentous injuries and other concerns as they age. Nice job. Okay, let's send it to the adults. Do I have a volunteer for the next category in question?
Parent volunteer. I hear mom. I don't think your mom is in here right now, Keenan, but Shrika? Oh, all right. Where is Shrika? Shrika's not here. This is Jaylee. This is a different mom. Oh my
God. Okay, I'll do fact or myth for 400.
400, please.
And you get to collaborate.
Fact or myth? Strength training will make me less flexible. True or false?
False.
Answer, please. Correct. It is false. When you do strength training correctly, when you use a full range of motion, it can actually build your flexibility. Think of this picture that I have of my friend doing this full squat. She needs a lot of mobility at her hips, her knees, and her ankles to do this movement. Stephanie, let's do it this way. You stay with the kids and I'll stay down here.
Okay.
We're breaking loose. We're mobile
All
with the
right,
microphones.
let's see.
Can I do facts or myth 400?
How about 600?
Oh, okay. This is strength. Oh,
Yep. Which type of aerobic exercise burns the most calories?
are you able to give a hint as to what are aerobic exercises?
I can. So aerobic exercises are anything where you traditionally think of, okay, I'm getting sweaty and I'm getting my heart rate up. So some examples might be
I think running.
sprinting, running, rowing, jumping rope.
Running and swimming.
Okay, so we're going to give them credit for that because the truth is that it depends, and it depends on a lot of factors. But most importantly, it depends on you. So very loosely looking at it, yes, things like running and jumping rope do, quote unquote, burn the most calories, but a lot of factors go into it, like your personal fitness, your strength, your flexibility, all sorts of different factors. If you want to learn a little more, this is a really great tool where you can look at putting in your personal data with different exercises of how hard will I be working? My chart in the bottom left there goes into different types of exercise, like the top right where it says RT is resistance training. You've got continuous training, circuit training, those kinds of things to break down the amount of work and intensity you'll feel with these different exercises. And you can find that at that resource, at the ACE tool. Okay, it's back to the adults.
To your mom.
I wonder who on earth I'll pick on.
Listen, guys.
Okay, well, let's do work it out for 600.
Work it out for 600, please. True or false? Every workout should be high intensity.
We're gonna say false.
Answer, please. False. Consistent SMART training gives you more gains. So not every workout has to be pedal to the metal, I'm drenched in sweat. Back to the kids.
All right.
It's a tight competition.
What's left for 400, Pam? Do we know?
See, my friend up in the booth. Intense.
Intense 600.
True or false? Getting stronger is all about how much you lift.
False.
Answer, please. False. It is much more important to prioritize form and control and gradually progress your exercise than try to lift the most weight possible in one giant swing. Things like body weight exercise are very functional and they're cheap and effective. Okay.
Let's listen to the next one.
Dr. Gillingham.
Let's take type of exercise for 400, Pam.
What are 4 types of exercise you should try to include in your fitness plan? Broad categories.
Stretching, aerobic, resistance, balance.
What? I didn't see anything. What is aerobic, strength, balance, and flexibility? Quick question back to the kids. What's aerobic exercise?
When getting your heart rate up in track and field.
Nice. Back to the kids.
All right.
Okay. Work it out 600.
Yes, baby, we got it.
What? Oh, 400.
True or false? If I'm not sweating, I'm not working hard enough.
False.
False. Answer, please. You guys are so smart. So there are a lot of factors that go into the intensity of your workout. Please don't follow the whole no pain, no gain mindset. It's very dangerous and can lead to lots of injuries. Let's see, adults. Are we going to pull ahead here? Anyone really feeling a category?
Did we do intense for 600 yet? 400. We'll take 400.
True or false? Cardio is essential no matter what your goals are.
All right, I'm going to guess true.
This is somewhat true.
Oh, wait, let's hear why it's somewhat true. Let's hear why it's somewhat true. Go ahead, yeah.
So as was mentioned before, you definitely want some aerobic exercise. You don't always necessarily have to think, oh, I've got to then go on a 30-minute run. There's a lot of different ways to get cardio exercise. HIIT training combines cardio with resistance and is really effective. And you can do it in a shorter amount of time. And it's a little more fun than running for several miles, at least to me.
Nice.
I think it's back to the kids unless we're all done.
Do we have anything left? We got 200s left. Okay, Chris.
Fact or myth 200.
Strength training will make me bulky.
Oh. What do you think that is, Chris?
You guys have to collect? Guys, you have to collect in the Okay.
I say false, but somewhat true. Because you get muscles when you do strength training, but that doesn't make you like bulky.
Answer, please.
You bricked up.
So this is false.
Does that still count? I said false.
I don't know.
So actually the opposite is true for a lot of people, especially women. If you look in that top left corner versus Simone Biles in that bottom right corner, you can definitely see a difference on their bodies, right? The woman in the top left, she's had extra things given to her to make her body look like that. I think we could all agree that Simone Biles is extremely strong, but she doesn't look like she has mountains for biceps, correct? Overall, building muscles gives you a leaner look and it helps you boost your metabolism and move more effectively. I think we've got one more question right.
That's right.
And I'm going to pick on my doctor friends over here.
I'll take whatever's left.
True or false, you can get dramatic and lasting results quickly.
I wish, man. False.
Yes, that is false. any exercise routine that promises you in a week you'll lose 20 pounds or that you'll gain strength in 1 week, please don't do that exercise program. That's just not good in any way. Really, this has to be a lifestyle choice, and you have to pick something that you really enjoy because you need to love your lifestyle. You don't want to hate your workout routine and force yourself to do it every day. Thank you, guys. Great job with Jeopardy!
The big question is who are the winners?
So we've got 2,400 points for the kids, and the adults got 2,000.
Good job, guys. Good job. All right. Good job. I might bring you up some fidget spinners through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, guys. Could we jump ahead, please? So now I'd like to talk about what muscles are and how we actually build strength. If you saw my talk last year, you'll remember that there are a couple different ways our muscles move. One is concentric exercise, which means the muscle shortens. So my biceps here, it's bringing this part of my arm closer to my shoulder. Another is eccentric exercise, which means the muscle's lengthening, so it's moving the other direction. The third is an isometric contraction, which would be if I just engage my bicep to hold this water, but it wasn't moving through space. If you think of this a little more functionally, concentric contraction would be pushing up from a squat, like when you stand up. Eccentric is when you lower down. Cool? Now, how muscles work is actually really interesting. And what I'd like to show you a quick video of is called the sliding filament theory. This was a product of the 1950s, which tells us how muscles shorten and lengthen on each other and the different bindings that happen. So let's watch this first, and then I'll tell you why this is so interesting.
Sliding filament theory is the mechanism by which muscles are thought to contract at a cellular level. An understanding of the structure of skeletal muscle is useful when learning how sliding filament theory works. Each muscle is made up of a number of bundles of muscle fibers. Each bundle of muscle fibers contains anywhere from 10 and 100 individual fibers. Each muscle fiber itself contains cylindrical organelles known as myofibrils, which themselves are bundles of proteins called actin and myosin. Surrounding the myofibril, there is a network of tubules and channels called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, where calcium is stored. Each myofibril can be broken down into functional repeating segments called sarcomeres. If we look at a two-dimensional model of a sarcomere, it consists of actin and myosin. When a nerve impulse arrives at the muscle, it causes a release of a chemical called acetylcholine. The presence of acetylcholine causes depolarization, enabling calcium to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The calcium binds to troponin, changing its shape, and so moving tropomyosin from the active site of the actin. The myosin filaments can now attach to the actin, forming a cross bridge. The breakdown of ATP releases energy, which enables the myosin to pull the actin filaments inwards, contracting the muscle. This occurs along the entire length of every myofibril in the muscle cell. When an ATP molecule binds to the myosin head, the myosin detaches from the actin and the cross bridge is broken. When the ATP is then broken down, the myosin head can again attach to an actin binding site further along the actin filament and repeat the process. This repeated pulling of the actin over the myosin is often known as the ratchet mechanism. This process of muscular contraction can last for as long as there are adequate ATP and Ca+ stores. Once the nerve impulse stops, the Ca+ is pumped back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the actin returns to its resting position, causing the muscle to lengthen and relax.
So as I mentioned before, this was a theory that came out from two separate labs, one here in the US and one over in the UK back in the 1950s. It's still labeled a theory because there's still a lot we don't know about how muscles work, and some new research is coming out that's very interesting, talking about how water impacts this whole process. That we maybe need to think of this as a little more dynamic and the muscles a little more like a sponge squeezing and releasing when these bindings occur. This is going to come up again later, I promise. So before we go into strength training, it's important to know a couple of terms. Strength is the force that your muscles can exert. Power is a product of strength and speed. So this can get a little bit confusing. So if you think about it, a power lifter could lift their entire body weight over their head, but it might take them a little bit of time. Now think of a gymnast who has to propel themselves and can probably lift the same amount, but they do it so quickly that then they can flip and turn in the air. So that's the difference with power and strength. Power is more traditionally considered to be an element of success with different athletic events like track and field, skating, all sorts of different things. Endurance is the muscle's ability to perform a repeated action over and over and sustain that. Your 1 rep max is the most you can possibly lift one time, and then after that, you're done. So that power comes into play here when you think of the force velocity curve. So there's a relationship between how much you're moving and how quickly you move it. For strength training and power training, you really want to think of what your goals are and what activities you are trying to achieve to determine the appropriate intensity and the appropriate movements that you're working on. Next up, we're talking about how the muscles get bigger, which is hypertrophy. On the other side of that, you've got atrophy, which is where the muscles get smaller, which you might see in someone who doesn't move very much, maybe someone who's been in a hospital bed for a long time, and they get very skinny and their muscles waste. Flip side of that, you've got hypertrophy, and we've got a couple different types. One type is transient hypertrophy, which, raise your hand if you've ever experienced this, if you've ever gone on a date or been on a date with someone who, wanted to just look really, really good on the date and did like a couple push-ups or lifted weights a few times and then was like, yeah, my muscles are looking really, really good. That's transient hypertrophy. So that's not a permanent change. There's some changes in the fluids of the muscles that after they lift a little weight, makes them look really, really good. Chronic hypertrophy is when you've consistently strength trained and built more muscle on itself to make it bigger. Now, when we train for different types of muscles, we've got different intensities, repetitions, sets, and rests that we want to go for. With FAODs, like with everyone else, you do want to do a little bit of everything, but the theory is that you'll have more success if you go for more of that strength training. And I'll go into why in a moment. When we build strength, we're actually causing some damage to those muscle fibers that stimulates protein synthesis. As was mentioned in that video, the actin and myosin, they're just different proteins that are moving and gliding on each other. So when we overstretch or strain those, repair mechanisms come in that add more layers to that, add more fibers to make the movement more efficient the next time you do it. And how we do this is through progressive training, progressive overload. So what that means is we're trying to constantly have your muscles be challenged, but not to the point of that lower graph where you're overtraining and getting injury, fatigue, getting bored of the exercise. As you might have noticed, there's something really important there, which is training and recovery intervals. Now, as I mentioned, strength and power training, in theory, lend themselves well to patients with FAODs. All of this is definitely open to study and something that we need to look into further. But as you all know, we've got different energy systems that supply our cells. And what we're trying to maximize is more of these intense energy systems as opposed to more of these prolonged, longer duration systems for energy. Now, a caveat here is that one energy system never works in isolation. You will always see people, like even football players, like those big bulky guys on the line who are pushing and shoving at the other side, they're engaging different energy systems when they're doing different movements. It's never one in isolation. But to the best of our ability, if we build our training program, we can try to maximize the energy systems that we want to use as opposed to diving into our fat stores for that energy. So something you've heard me say a lot is intensity. This determines so much of your exercise program, but how do we know how much is too much and how much is too little? So before we can look for what we're aiming for, we have to see what's normal. And part of the reason I put this slide in is because I'm working with a young lady right now who has Ehlers-Danlos disease, and she recently came in to see me in the clinic, and she was like, I'm so worried. I was doing this pulmonary fitness test, and when I was doing it, my blood pressure, it got up to 160. That's so bad. I said, okay, that sound, yep. She's like, but that's so high. And I think it's just important. I don't think we all are educated well to know what is normal for us. When we're younger, our heart rate and our respiratory rates tend to be higher and our blood pressures tend to be lower. As we age, this relationship inverts a bit. When we do exercise, as you know, our heart rates tend to increase. Your systolic blood pressure, that first number when you go into the doctor's office, that should increase. However, that lower number, your diastolic blood pressure, shouldn't change very much. Your blood oxygen, which is that SpO2, should stay relatively consistent as well. If you're seeing abnormalities there, it's best to see your physician and share those findings and see if maybe something else might be going on. Maybe we need to modify things. Quick question to everyone. Does anyone know what a MET is, or have you ever seen it on workout equipment and been like, I don't know what that is? It's a metabolic equivalent of tasks. So that's a rough way that we measure the amount of work and energy is going into different exercises. So it compares that activity compared to your resting state and how much energy is needed, because you do burn energy even just sitting here listening to me chat to you. If you saw my talk last year, you'll see this is that same formula of how to find your heart rate zones. This is going to be your guide with determining your intensity. So there's the formula up there. I gave a few examples on the different steps. Essentially, you take 220 and subtract your age, and then you go by the different percentages based on your training and fitness goals. If you do not have a wearable heart rate tracker, it's completely fine. You can use different exertion scales to see if you're hitting the target zones. So as you'll see in the next slides, level 7 out of 10 on that modified scale is a good spot to try to hit when you're doing these exercises. So that translates into that hard level where you're having proper form, but you're definitely feeling it. It's definitely challenging you. This is another visual of that exertion scale that also translates to your 1 repetition max. So you might use this information when you start your resistance training program if you are using free weights, where you can try to see what is the max that I can possibly lift, and then bring it down from there to, okay, I'm going to start working at probably that 50-60% of my 1 rep max, and then see if I can build up from there. So from here, The parts that I'd really like you to pay attention to are these lower rows here. What you can expect when you do these types of exercise, the bottom one being more traditional resistance training, so like lifting weights, doing body weight squats, that kind of stuff, is that you'll see your heart rate gradually increase with the repetitions that you do. If you're doing more incremental work, you'll see this increase kind of in this straight line, and it'll plateau near the max. As I mentioned before, though, no energy system works in isolation, but with FAODs, we're really aiming to try to maximize in here. So we're bumping up the intensity compared to, like, lower intensity exercise would be that more sustained exercise, just longer holds, longer duration. So let's talk about structuring your session. As I mentioned, you do want to do a little bit of the different types of exercise, even if your goals are more centered on strength or power training. The first thing that you'll feel when you start doing any resistance training is a perceivable change of strength that is really your neuromotor system being more efficient. So immediately after starting strength training, the neurons that trigger your muscles to turn on are able to more effectively do that by gathering more of those muscle fibers in a group. So we want to build neuromuscular control, build up endurance, build up hypertrophy, gradually making our way up this pyramid. I'll show you a few tables here. This is a good way to build endurance, where you can see beginner, intermediate, advanced levels. These are all from the American College of Sports Medicine, talking about how the intensity that you should aim for and the repetitions and sets that you should do. With endurance, you're doing more repetitions at a lighter weight compared to strength or power training. Hypertrophy, so that like building of that visible muscle. And then into strength training. So as you can see, our load intensity is gradually increasing, and our number of reps per set gradually decreases. In the final slide, power training, you'll see that there is no beginner category. So as you remember, that was that top of that pyramid. This is after you've been training for a bit and you're really specializing some of these movements. But a big takeaway from this is that you really do want to mix these up. You don't want to do just one type of training over and over and over. When we work in therapy, we try to build things on different cycles. So think of a macrocycle as like that big long year of training. A mesocycle, you're doing maybe a couple weeks. Microcycle is like, okay, I'm getting ready for this sport event that I'm training for. Once you go through that full training, it's really good to mix things up and maybe try a different type of exercise. So maybe, say I'm getting ready to do some swimming. So I train at swimming for a while, and then I challenge my body by switching to a different activity, like I'm riding my bike. This prevents overtraining and stagnation of your exercise. It's a periodization technique that helps you get more gains more quickly. As you can see, even professional players, professional athletes need to mix things up. That's why you'll see things like football players do ballet class. The chart on the right just kind of reinforces that. You don't have to worry about that specific table. So here's an example of that, where for this individual, we could break it into, okay, we're going to do strength training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So maybe on Monday, I want to prioritize my strength or my power, and say, for instance, I can lift 200 pounds. So I'm going to do some exercises that have me do around 4 repetitions, doing that, or lifting that weight. Once I'm done with that, we move on to Wednesday. Okay, maybe this time I'm working on hypertrophy. I find my weight, adjust my number of reps, do my exercises that day. Maybe on Friday, I'm working on my endurance and I'm doing more full body exercises like I'm doing walking lunges or I'm doing body weight squats. So now I'd like to show a few examples of sessions. You can find a bunch of resources online, but big takeaways I'd like you to get from this are try to work different muscle groups at different times. Try not to do, okay, in one day I'm going to do a bunch of push-ups and then a bunch of pull-ups and then a bunch of bicep curls. That is overloading your upper extremities. Try to mix things up. At the very least, if you have a quote-unquote arm day, the next workout session, try to work a different body part. Try to do your legs, try to do your core. I ran a little over, so I won't go to those links, but know that there are a bunch of different apps available online, and they're all customizable based on your interests and your goals. So key takeaway points are aiming for strength. You're looking for that lower number of repetitions, but higher resistance. Endurance, you're going for lower intensity, lower repetition, but lower resistance, but more repetition, so you're doing things longer. Periodization is very important to prevent your exercise routine from being stale and stagnant and prevent you from possibly entering rhabdo or having any other injury. Strength gains are very specific to the speed and movement patterns that you do. So don't think, okay, I'm doing a bunch of bicep curls, that's going to give me the power to do a discus throw really fast. And like I mentioned before, alternating your body parts that you work is really important. Now, this part is really important, and I mentioned this during my last talk, eccentric exercise. So if you remember, that's that lengthening exercise, can be tricky, and it's something that needs to be studied more. We don't have a really great understanding of eccentric exercise and how it works and what it does to the muscle, but we do know that it can put you at a higher risk of rhabdo. We've seen it with people who've done a bunch of lunges back to back. We've seen it in people with CrossFit who just push too much with eccentric exercise. You can also think of that like with downhill running, where you see that in people's quads and their calves. However, eccentric exercise is also really interesting, which I'll go into in the next slide. So there's a little bit of murkiness still here with that. When you start your workout training, try to start at a lower intensity and gradually progress it. Don't think, okay, day one, I'm going to go and lift 60, 70, 80 pounds. Please include some dynamic warm-ups and stretching with your routine. It helps you flesh out your system and helps keep you nice and mobile and can reduce your risk of soreness later. Now back to that eccentric exercise. So something we do know about it is that it has an ability to change how our muscles are. If you remember that video with the different parts, the myofibrils, the sarcomeres, eccentric exercise is interesting because it can change how those bundles are arranged. And this is fresh off the press from the Eastern Carolina University. There have been studies in mouse models of mice who have been given an FAOD that show that the orientation of those muscle fibers isn't quite that straight line that you see in controls. It's more of a zigzag, which you can see up in here compared to controls, which leads to decreased force production. Coming back to that eccentric exercise, so we know that eccentric exercise changes the orientation of those muscle fibers and can lengthen the muscle, which can lead to more force production. So that's an area that may benefit from future research to see if controlled exposure to different eccentric exercises could lead to some strength gains, especially since there is a protective effect with some eccentric exercise that's shown that if you do a few repetitions of one specific eccentric exercise and then later, after a rest period, like maybe a week later, do an eccentric exercise program, there's decreased risk of DOMS, decreased risk of rhabdo, improved strength, and improved recovery. So like I said, I'm sorry that is still so murky, but there's a potential avenue in the future to learn a lot more about how we can specifically gain strength, especially related to this population. And thank you to the researchers at Eastern Carolina for letting me share their slide and their findings. Now, I know I ran a little bit late. Do we have time for questions, or do we want to move to the gym?
I think it would be good if we go ahead and get ready to move to the gym. So there might be some, and then if you have questions, please, 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 she will be here for the expert panel. Hold those questions, because the last slide that she showed is pretty big news, like, and it's hot off the press. So there might be some questions about that. But is there instructions for people how to enter the gym? And kids in the back, this is specifically for you. So listen up. This is for all of us here, so she can kind of guide us to what we need to do when we get into the gym.
Yes, so everyone is participating. I'm staring you guys down.
Oh yeah, maybe I should say adults listen too.
So I am so excited to share that I'm joined today by some fabulous students from the local physical therapy school. They're helping me out. We're breaking out into 4 different groups based on age. So we've got one group for infants, one group for kids, one for like young adult athletes, and one for adults. So I'll have you break out into the groups that you feel like fits your needs, fits what you're working on, and we're gonna go have some fun and do some exercises.
All right, so go head over, and then guys, we will meet back here after that is over at, I just have to check the time. We'll meet back here at about 2:45 after the PT session in the gym.